Welcome to night one of our online Progressive Summit. I want to begin by telling you why we're doing this. There's a lot of focus on the presidential campaign, which of course there should be. These are revolutionary times. There is a political revolution going on, and that's a good thing. President John F. Kennedy said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." But a revolution isn't something you kind of sort of do. So that means that if we're going to have a political revolution, it can't be just related to the White House. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. If we don't have progressives in Congress, then that will either stymie a progressive president or make it far too easy for one who resists progressive policies. So we need to enter a new era. We can't just think in terms of the congressional representative in my district or even the senator only in my state. We need to think in terms of ways that we can support progressive candidates around the country. You know, our founders in making Congress, a co-equal branch, made it 2 houses. There's the Senate. Those people are elected every 6 years. But the House of Representatives, they called it the People's House, to be elected every 2 years. They thought it was to be the people. It would be the candle maker. It would be the farmer. It would be the shoemaker. And that's what it should be. It should be the people's house. And when Abraham Lincoln said, there's not that much evil that any government in the United States can do, as long as the people remain vigilant. That's what he was referring to. He was referring to the fact that it was built into the Constitution that every 2 years you can throw the bums out if you want to. Well, because of gerrymandering, because of the undue influence of money on our politics, right now, there aren't that many seats that you can literally, honestly, for all practical purposes say, that one's up. And that's what this Progressive Summit is for. Everyone that you are going to meet on this summit, tonight and in the nights ahead that we do this, are people who are not only running on solid progressive values, they are running serious candidacies. They have been vetted for those purposes, vetted by Blue America, for all of us who are interested only in supporting the people who really are standing for something that would actually turn the tide in terms of a serious progressive presence in the U.S. Congress. But these people, of course, are not supported by huge super PACs. You know, they're not backed by corporate money, quite the opposite, because that's not who they would be taking a stand for. They would be taking a stand for the men, for the women, and for the children of the United States, and for the earth on which we live. So I hope that you will seriously consider these candidates and all the ways that you can support them. Not only financially, which unfortunately, until we have public funding of federal campaigns, until we have serious campaign finance reform, until we have a constitutional amendment that overrides Citizens United, you and I have to chip in. You and I have to support these candidacies. But it's not just money, you know. It's also your social media. It's calling people that you know. You know, you might see a candidate in Florida or Michigan or California and Nevada, and you might not live there yourself, but you think, wow, I know someone who does. You make a call, you get on social media, you volunteer. Hey, listen, if you want a political revolution, revolutions don't happen because we kind of sort of sometimes, you know, when it's convenient, participate. We really participate because we're serious. We're serious about our country, we're serious about our children and our children's children, and we're serious about our world. So thank you for being here with us, and I hope you enjoy this process. Jamie Raskin is running in Maryland's 8th District, and his primary is on April 26th. You can find out more about him at jamieraskin.com. Once again, we have a candidate who represents this tension, this real revolutionary fervor, as we've said before, not just going on in the country, but within the Democratic Party, also within the Republican in its own way. And so it's not just important, you know, when I was growing up, we thought, well, if we vote for the Democrat, we're voting for the progressive policies, certainly in most parts of the country. That has really changed because the Democratic Party has gone in such this corporate-driven direction, where it is almost as much a handmaiden, and in some cases every bit as much a handmaiden to Wall Street, to big banks, and so forth, as is the Republican Party. So what we're trying to do here is to highlight candidates who not only represent good, solid values, but particularly this progressive drive that is trying to pull the Democratic Party, not just the country, but the Democratic Party specifically, away from this rightward direction. So, hello, Jamie Raskin, state senator at present, as well as a law professor. You teach constitutional law and legislation at American University College of Law. Is that correct, Jamie?
That's right. And thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be
Well,
here.
thank you so much. I know that you feel very strongly about taking on the NRA, climate change, marriage equality, and most particularly something which I feel very strongly about, and that is what I see, I'm sure you do too, is the cancer underlying all the cancers. Getting the undue influence of money out of our political system, dealing the kind of corrupt influence that it has. Tell me about that, and most particularly, what would you do about it as a congressman?
Well, look, I mean, what people hate about big money in the age of Citizens United is that it comes to substitute for everything else, for actual legislative experience and success, for political activism and engagement, for voting in a lot of cases. We have candidates who don't even vote, but they decide to spend millions of dollars getting other people to vote for them. That's a kind of cheapening of democracy. And, when I first ran for the state Senate, and I've been a state senator for 10 years, I said I was not going to accept any money from corporations, partnerships, LLCs, artificial entities, none of it. Now, of course, none of them wanted to give me any money anyway, so it wasn't that big of a sacrifice. But it has given me the independence in office to fight for the common good and the public interest against the corporate agendas which are constantly insinuating themselves into our political life. And in this campaign, I'm certainly the only candidate in my race, and I think I may be the only candidate in America, but I'm hoping that lots will pick up what I'm doing. I'm saying I'm taking no money from big oil, big gas, or big coal, because we need to break from the carbon barons and break from the carbon paradigm and move into the renewable energy future. We need to save humanity.
You know, Janie, you are certainly among America's elite. You graduated from Harvard, went to Harvard Law School, editor of Harvard Law Review. You teach at American University. Someone like yourself really interests me because I think that there is this, we paint all politicians with a broad brush. And I think that you are an example of someone who clearly, quote unquote, doesn't need to be doing this. You could be making a huge amount of money in the private sector with the kind of background and the education that you have. But you represent really the highest vision for what public service should be. And I really admire that in you. And I'd like to know something about what has been the psychological process that you yourself have gone through, that you have parlayed the kind of education that you have and experience that you have into something as it's really grueling, exciting, but grueling as running for political office.
Well, thank you for saying those things. I love politics. I love being in a public office where I can represent people, and I give all of my constituents my cell phone number. We just went through a big snowstorm here, and I was out trying to make sure that people's roads were getting cleared, and I was out, working at the homeless shelter one night, handing out food. And for me, this is what gives me joy and pleasure. I, have never had much interest in making money as a corporate lawyer. And, I know people who do that, and it's not necessarily dishonorable work anyway, but I love the public service I've been able to do. When I first announced that I was getting into politics, I made an announcement of everything that I wanted to do going to the Senate. And you got to understand, I was running against a 32-year incumbent who was president pro tem of the Maryland Senate. He said, one, it's impossible. You cannot beat a 32-year incumbent who's the boss of our political machine here. And two, even if you were to win, you could never get done any of the crazy stuff you're talking about doing. When I first announced, one of the pundits said that my chances of victory were impossible. And then 9 months later, we got 67% of the vote. Another pundit said that my victory was inevitable. So I went from impossible to inevitable, all in a 9-month period. But really, it wasn't impossible. It wasn't inevitable. Through organizing, we were able to make it happen. And when I kicked off, I laid out everything that I wanted to do. So it was like abolish the death penalty, restore voting rights for the ex-felons, strong environmental legislation to clean up the Chesapeake Bay, confront global warming and climate change in a serious way, marriage equality, and on and on. And the woman came up to me after I gave my speech, and she said, Jamie, I love your speech, great speech, but one thing is, take out all that stuff about gay marriage, because it's never going to happen. This was just 10 years ago. And she said, it won't happen. Even the gay candidates aren't talking about it, and it makes you sound like you're really extreme, like you're not in the political center. And I kind of smiled and I said, well, now that you put it like that, what I recognize is that it's not my ambition to be in the political center, because the political center moves around. It's my ambition to be in the moral center. And our job as progressives is to find what's right and bring the political center to us. And that's what's exciting, and that's what's gratifying about being in progressive politics. It's making things change. And so we've seen extraordinary changes in Maryland. We abolished the death penalty. We passed marriage equality. We restored voting rights for the ex-felons. We passed the toughest gun safety law in America, and I introduced a ban on military-style assault weapons. We stood down the NRA, and we got it done. And so I want to go to Washington to do the exact same thing, because none of us is going to be able to create utopia in one state. And we've got the best gun safety law in America right now in Maryland, but we just had the bloodiest summer on record, and they found that a majority of the guns that were involved in these homicides were flowing in from Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New York, and so on. So we need a national confrontation with the NRA. And guess what? I think we'll be able to bring over some of the gun owners who recognize that universal background check is only common sense legislation. And that's one of the things that we're doing in Maryland.
I agree with you 100%. You speak to my mind, but you also speak to my heart, Jamie. Your passion is as commendable as your intellectual understanding of these issues. And I hope that all of the things that you said you care about, you get to stand for and work for in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I think what you said about being in the moral center is so correct. You know, Mike Noland, who is running for Congress in Illinois, talked about how these progressive values really are mainstream. So often, many of the things you've talked about are deemed as with the woman who told you not to talk about marriage equality, that there's some kind of far left-wing position. These are not. They represent the moral center.
The political center is usually defined by big money and lobbyists, but the moral center these days, moral center is defined by grassroots politics. And at a certain point, grassroots politics and organizing gets so powerful that it brings the political center to us.
May it be so. As my mother would say, from your mouth to God's ears. Okay, Jamie Raskin, you heard it here. Jamie Raskin, Raskin. He is running for Maryland's 8th District. His primary is April 26th. We've got to hurry in helping this one. It's JamieRaskin.com. Has a big primary, 8 candidates. Did I cover it all, Jamie?
Let me just say one more thing. First of all, everybody's invited to come on out to Maryland's 8th Congressional District. Let me know if you're going to be in Washington or Baltimore. You're right nearby us in Montgomery County, Frederick County, and Carroll County. We have more individual donations than any congressional campaign in America that's not an incumbent, and more than the vast majority of incumbents even. One of the people I'm running against has more corporate PAC money than any non-incumbent running for Congress in America. So I'm really up against the power of big money. If all of your fans and followers can go to my website, check it out, and give something and become part of the movement.
Yeah, I know one of the congressional candidates on the summit has a program where people even from outside of the state can help you in terms of your calling. So you might want to think about introducing something like that. I don't know if that would be of value to you. And yeah, this is not just about Maryland. This is about the United States of America. And we need more people like you in Washington saying exactly the kind of things that you've already said here. I wish you the very, very best, Jamie, and I hope we hear more about you in the future.
You're very kind. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. God bless you, sir. Tim Canova is running. Are you ready, progressives? Against Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Hello, clap, clap, applause machine in Florida District 23. That means that he's running against the machine. We know that this is a political revolutionary time, and it's on 2 levels. One has to do with the political revolution in the country, and another one, and you see this in the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party, a revolution against a corporate-held, stultifying, and in his own way corrupt establishment within the parties. So for those of you who have, certainly for those of you who have endorsed Bernie, as I have, and as Tim Canova has, but for any of you who feel that the Democratic Party needs to be less tightly driven by a small group. You know, sometimes I feel like the Republicans have obviously more elitist policies, but almost a more egalitarian relationship with their own constituency. Democrats tend to have more egalitarian policies, but a very elitist relationship with their own constituency. And the likes of Deborah Wasserman Schultz, with all due respect, is exactly that. So I'm thrilled to see that Tim Canova is running. And as you'll hear in just a moment, you'll hear a lot of reasons why it's exciting that he's running. So Tim Canova, hi and welcome.
Thank you. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I want all the progressives who are listening to know that you are an activist, you are an attorney, you are an educator, and you are a real expert on rigged economic and political systems, so much so that you have worked on various very high-level committees, including formed by Bernie Sanders, having to do with the likes of Joseph Stiglitz and Robert Reich and others who really know what they're talking about, Jeffrey Sachs, James Galbraith, and others who really know what they're talking about the corruption of Wall Street and its influence on the U.S. government. Would you say that that's correct?
Yes, you're referring to an advisory committee that Senator Sanders appointed me to in 2011, and it was a committee to advise him on how to reform the Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve, you're also a passionate opponent of the TPP.
Yes.
I think it's so important because progressives have this instinctive understanding that the economy is rigged, but we need those who understand that to be standing for that within the U.S. government. So we're very, very excited that you're running. Tell me something about the process that took you from someone who knows about economics, is an educator, who is an expert on these issues. What was the psychological process within you that actually took you from understanding those things and being an activist on those things to the point of actually running for Congress and having the chutzpah to take on Debbie Wasserman Schultz? Tell us about that.
Well, if I had spoken with you a year ago, I would not have seen this on my radar whatsoever. Last summer, I was active in lobbying Debbie Wasserman Schultz's office against the fast track for the TPP, for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I was working with a bunch of grassroots folks from organized labor, the Citizens Trade Campaign, a lot of progressive Democrats. And I tried to contact her office. I've been teaching international trade law for many years. I was very critical of the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Free Trade Area of the Americas proposal of President Bush. And I had studied plenty on this and had some real views on the TPP and couldn't get anywhere with Wasserman Schultz's office, couldn't get any even emails returned. And we were sorely disappointed when she voted to fast-track the TPP. And that's when I started looking much more closely at her record. And the record is not a pretty one. She takes a tremendous amount of money from giant corporations, and she votes in the interests of giant corporations right down the line, very contrary to the interests of real human beings and her own constituents here in Florida's 23rd District. She has voted against Wall Street reform time and time again, most recently voting to prevent the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau from writing rules dealing with payday loans and with racial discrimination in auto loans. Yeah, you would think we didn't even have a financial crisis in 2008 when you see votes like that. She has taken a tremendous amount of money from private prisons, alcohol and beverage political action committees. This was written about in The Intercept recently, and she's, not surprisingly, a big drug warrior. She opposed medical marijuana 2 years ago when it was on the ballot. It almost passed in Florida, just fell short, and she's been for privatized prisons. So these are real contrasts, real differences I have with her. My campaign is not taking a penny of corporate money, and we're representing working folks and real human beings. We want to end this drug war. We believe that state and local governments should make their own drug policies. It shouldn't be dictated by the federal government. We're for reforming Wall Street. We're against these trade giveaways that are really investment agreements for large multinational corporations. We'd like to see Social Security and Medicare protected. Debbie Wasserman Schultz hasn't even signed on to a bill that was introduced by Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sherrod Brown and co-sponsored by Bernie Sanders, which would increase the funding for the Supplemental Security Income Program, which really takes care of the poorest elderly folks and disabled folks in this country. And she's turned her back on that. And then finally, there's the issue of climate change, which in South Florida is not some theoretical discussion. The projections are that within 20 or 30 years, big parts of South Florida are going to be underwater. This is people's livelihoods, and it's their homes that are at stake. And you take a look at something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that will make it that much harder to regulate carbon emissions. It will make it that much harder to try to not just stop climate change, but to deal with to mitigate the impact of climate change.
Now, every progressive needs to know, in case anybody doesn't, that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she is the Democratic Party's head of the Congressional Campaign Committee. Is that correct?
Well, I believe she was with the Congressional Campaign Committee, and now she's the chair of the Democratic National Committee.
Right, and that's so important because she's really, I call it these days the Hillary protection machine, and very much responsible for the fact that there were so few, have been so few Democratic debates, and the ones that have occurred on the presidential campaign trail have sort of been hidden. So I think that for those of us who've been lifelong Democrats, this is a very, very important issue. When I grew up, those who we saw the Democratic Party as a real vessel, as a real container for where you could pour your progressive values into the political system. And so that tension is so important. So I think someone like yourself running, and someone like yourself running also in a seat which actually takes on someone who is such a linchpin in that is extremely important. How can people most help you, Tim? What do you need more than anything else?
You know, we do need money, and we are raising money. In only 3 weeks, we've received more than 4,000 individual contributions, which is really unheard of for a congressional race. Many congressional races don't get that kind of support during an entire year, and we've gotten that in 3 weeks. And for all the money we've raised in 3 weeks from small contributions, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, in one day, just this 2 days ago, had a $5,000 a plate fundraiser. She probably raised as much money in one day from a handful of wealthy CEOs than 4,000 Americans have been able to contribute to this campaign. And I want to stress that these are small contributions. I saw over the weekend an article that the average contribution for Senator Bernie Sanders was $27.
Right.
So I went on ActBlue to see what our average contribution was, and I kid you not, it was $27.27.
Right.
And I took that as a good omen.
Yeah, it is a good omen. And also I think progressives need to understand that you don't have to make a big contribution to be making a difference, because if enough people pay what they can, and if you're a real progressive and you really want things to change in that direction in this country, it should be worth $25 to you.
That's right.
You might not be able to make a lot of $25 donations, but that's why we're doing this summit, so that people can recognize how many congressional and senatorial candidates around the country are standing for these issues. What about getting money out of politics? How are we going to do it, Tim?
Well, if I'm elected, I think one of the first things that I'd like to do is to try to convene a bipartisan caucus in the House on Capitol Hill for campaign finance reform.
I am so grateful to you, because I've been asking this question to so many people who, when I ask, how are we going to get the money out of politics? They talk about overriding Citizens United, but hello, general concept there. Or people have to come together. Hello, general concept there. You are the first person who's actually said what you would do as a congressman to get this ball rolling. So I want you to say it again, exactly what you would do, because I love what you just said.
Thank you. We need a bipartisan caucus in Congress that is committed to taking money out of politics, overturning Citizens United for sure, campaign finance reform. We should have free airtime on television. Walter Cronkite, the great anchorman for many years, before he passed away, he tried to champion this issue.
That's right.
These are public airwaves. We shouldn't have to rent them back from large corporations.
Exactly. And also, Lawrence Lessig says if we have a constitutional amendment calling for public funding of federal campaigns, that by itself overrides Citizens United. Would you support that as a constitutional amendment?
100%. And I make this point time and again, that I think the United States is one of half a dozen democracies around the world that doesn't have publicly financed elections. And, instead we have this system where the politician acts like a middleman or a middle person, collecting money from large corporate interests just to pay large broadcasting interests for 30-second attack ads that really do not add to the public discussion of the issues in any significant way. They're quite the opposite.
How old are you?
I'm sorry?
How old are you?
I'm 55.
Because I want to see you more than win. I want to see you keep going. I think that you just are great. And
Well, thank you.
I like to see someone who is still young enough to have a long road ahead of you in this game. I want you
Well,
to win.
I don't feel all that young, but, I say Senator Sanders has inspired me to see a man 2 decades older than me to be putting it all out on the line. And I realized last summer when that fast track vote happened, I have a lot of faith that Bernie Sanders could get elected. And I thought, if he gets elected, he's got to have a Congress that's going to work with him and pass a new deal, something different than what we've had. And it's not a Congress filled with people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So that animated me almost more than anything.
I'm so with you, and that animates me as well. That's why we're doing this summit, because progressives particularly need to understand that it's not enough to just focus on that hot and sexy presidential campaign. We have to be there with these congressional races. If there's a Democrat, hopefully Bernie, but some people watching this summit might not agree with that. That's fine. Whoever the Democrat is, they're going to need a Congress that supports these kind of ideas. And if it's a Republican president, we're really going to need people such as yourself in Congress to resist some of the changes that we know will be promoted by that president. So I just think you are fantastic, and I want everybody to know this one. Tim Canova. TimCanova.com. Make sure, everybody, that you really check out Tim's website, that you're very clear. This is a professor. This is a man who is an expert on economics. He knows not only that the system is rigged, but he knows how it's rigged. And that's a very, very big deal, because he can really get into the sinews and talk about this is what the corruption is, this is where it needs to change, because a lot of those devils are in the details. And this is a man who really knows how to get in there and stand for more than the values, stand for the actual substantial changes that need to occur. This is a man who actually talks about a caucus having to do with getting the money out of politics, not just vague generalities about how we all need to come together and override Citizens United. He has a plan for how we do it, how we make it happen. You've seen here on this summit already, this is a man who not only speaks with conviction, but speaks with great intelligence and information. You know, these kinds of candidates are not that common. This is a winner. This is a star. I know I myself am going to do everything I can to be of support. Tim Canova. Once again, remember, he's running in Florida's 23rd district. The primary date is August 30th. TimCanova.com. Please don't forget. Go to that website. Put it on your Facebook page. Put it on Twitter. Get the word out. Call anybody you know in Florida and do everything you can.
Thank you so much, Marianne.
I
Really
think you're the
appreciate
best.
it.
I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you
God
so
bless
much.
you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, I'm really excited about this one. This is California District 44. A woman named Nanette Berrigan. She comes from a district pretty close to where I live, and her candidacy is getting a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of attention particularly because she's taken on a very establishment and establishment-backed candidate in the Democratic primary. So it's very important for progressives around the country to know about Nanette, to know what she stands for. Nanette Berrigan, hello. It's lovely to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Tell me a little something about your background, your childhood, where you come from.
You know, my parents were born in Mexico, and they came here for a better life for their children.
Okay, so as a child of an immigrant, I know you have strong feelings about this issue, obviously.
Yes, this is a district where I grew up. This is a district that's a high immigrant community. So I grew up here in the Carson area, and one of the 10%ers who beat the odds, because in this district only 10% go on to college. And so this district is very working class, where there's high income inequality. My parents were immigrants, and I went on to UCLA undergrad and USC for law school, went on to work on the president's campaign, doing voter protection work, became a lawyer, did a lot of pro bono work, trying to give back. And then I ran for city council. When I ran, people said you can't win. Nobody knows who you are. And by the way, there hasn't been a woman in 10 years. I ran against 6 other candidates and came in first place, willing to stand on the issue of fighting for people against big oil. And this is the district is one of the most heavily polluted districts in the entire country. Kids here are walking around with inhalers around their neck. So one of the very first things we're going to do is moving toward cleaner, greener jobs here and having that conversation on how to clean up the air, because our kids deserve to breathe clean air. And what is happening is they're having really high asthma rates and cancer rates, and then they're getting sick, and then they're not making it to school. So it's impacting their education. My opponent's been fighting for the oil companies, and I've been fighting for people and public health. In this district, the way you talk about environment is you have to talk about it as a public health crisis. And that's how it resonates with them.
Okay.
So one is making sure we are moving toward cleaner, greener, renewable energies. That's not happening. That conversation isn't even happening here.
So anybody who is serious about the issue of climate change, environmental destructiveness and so forth really needs to know about your candidacy, because this is an issue where you not only stand for the issue so progressively, but where your opponents do not, even your Democratic opponent. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I tell people not all Democrats are created equally.
And this is what Nanette Berrigan represents. She represents somebody working and standing on and running on genuine progressive values. So I hope that you will go to Berrigan, that's Barragan, BerriganforCongress.com. All my best to you, Nanette. I hope you win. I'll do everything that I can. Thank you
Thanks
so
so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. God bless you, honey. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed our first episode of the Online Progressive Summit. I hope that you will join us for night 2, and I hope that you will go to sistergiant.com and find out further ways that you can help make all this happen.